Well, hi everyone and welcome to Dad's Shed. This is going to be a fairly quick visit because I'm just going to go over a small improvement I've just made to my Fobco. It's a lovely machine, but one of the things I would like to be able to do is to accurately feed the drill. It has got a scale on the side here, but it's fairly inaccurate. I've obviously got stops here as well, which I use quite a lot, but to be able to say I'm going to drill down from this point half an inch or 12 mil would be really useful. So I decided to invest in a fairly cheap from a fairly well-known online site, something to do with Brazil I believe. Anyway, a big forest somewhere. It's obviously Chinese. It's very inexpensive. I think it cost me £31 delivered, so not a huge outlay, but in order to fit it to this drill I've had to make a few components. On the front here is a panel which gives you the speeds and feeds and other information like lubrication. When I got it, it was broken, and this was screwed over the top. I made a plate to move that off to one side. What I've done here is I've made another plate out of 1.2mm steel sheet I had, using the slitting cutter in the grinder. I cut it out to a rectangle. I then bent it using my folder to 90 degrees, and then I've drilled through to take two 6mm holes and then drilled through the 4 hole positions to screw it under here onto the front of the drill. So that gives me an angle with 2 holes in it. I matched those 2 holes to a piece of 2" by 4mm strip I had. So that is now bolted fairly securely through there. I could then make some standoffs for the reading scale, because the way this is actually made is you're about 5mm short, with the brackets on here of actually having clearance behind, which isn't really very useful. And it didn't matter which way you put it, you still don't have the clearance. So all I've done here, I've used a couple of 4mm screws. They're Allen head, but it doesn't really matter. I've drilled and tapped the back plate, and I've screwed those into it and then put a locking nut on them. They then line up with the holes in the brackets on the scales, and I've put a nut and washer at the back and a lock nut and washer on the front. That's enabled me to move it around to get it vertical. So that's now nice and tight and vertical. The reed head slides up and down on there very nicely. Now the next issue is, how do I attach the reed head to something that's moving? I can't do it down there. There is nowhere else really, apart from here you have the stop. Now this is a 5/8 diameter screw. It's actually BSF, but it's a nice solid screw, and it's solid. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll take that off, put it in the lathe, drill and tap the end 6mm, and that will then take one of these. So I've drilled and tapped that 6mm. I then needed a bracket that would go from the back of the reed head to the top of that. That also makes sure I've got complete adjustment on these lock nuts so I can set the stops still. So, being high tech, I drew up a template. I've measured from the centre of this to the centre of the 5/8 bar. That's 70 millimetres, and the offset is 20 millimetres from the front face to the centre of there. So roughly drawing that out and then cutting out a piece of card and then mark that so that I could bend it to the relevant positions, mark it up, and then I can use that as a template to mark up some aluminium sheet that I had. It's actually part of an old piece of electrical work I was doing, and I just had enough left there with only one small hole in it to actually use it. So I've cut that out. I then folded it on the marks that I'd made on the card, then folded up the two bases, and I've actually glued those together using a super glue. So that, and before I'd actually glued it, I'd actually made sure it folded to the right position. So if I take those screws off of there, and the reason I've got an odd one here is that I've dropped one on the floor, and they're 3mm by about 10mm or 8mm, so they're not exactly big, and trying to find it was impossible. So I've got some 3mm screws, so I've stolen one from somewhere else. That just sits on there. That screws in, holds that in place. I'm not going to put the bottom one in yet because I want to put a washer on there to hold that tight. That then drops in with a washer on it to give it a bit better clamping. Screws in there nice and tight. That screws in there like that. And that screws in there like that. And then, that then follows this up and down. Now hopefully, you might be able to see this. Having put a couple of batteries in there, I can now zero it. This particular one, like all of them, you can actually go between inch and millimetres. But this actually is quite funny in that it will give you metric inch, so 1.125. So if I go down 1.25, okay, 1.251.5. So to all intents and purposes 1¼ inches. Actually in the top right hand corner of this readout it gives me the fraction size. So that actually reads 1.251, and up in the top there it says quarter. And obviously if I just swap across 31.79 millimeters. So hopefully that will enable me to be more accurate if I want to drill to depth, because all I need to do, I slacken that off, I can move that down until the drill is touching the top of the work. I can then zero it at that point, and I can drill down from there 3/4 of an inch according to the scale. So that's that. I think that was a very worthwhile 30 odd pound and a couple of bits of stock from the shelves and some stuff that was otherwise in the scrap bin. So I can now go to this, zero wherever I need, and I've also got repeatability. So I'm slowly upgrading the machines in here, using technology where I think it's appropriate and helping me be a little more accurate in what I'm doing. Yes, I should be able to do it other ways, but I don't get out here to play as often as I'd like and trying to remember how everything works and what I'm doing, whereas on this, and also as one gets older, eyesight gets a little bit worse. That's a nice, easily read scale. So I think all in all, a good use for a couple of hours and some leftover stock and a £30 digital readout. And the other nice thing is that this particular readout has the scales are obviously fixed, but the read head you can move and it will stick wherever you need it to. So if you're working from the side, you can put it there so you can read it there. If you're working from the front, which is the normal position, that will sit quite happily up there, and I'll move those round out the way. Little upgrade, little bit of time, little bit of money, should help me with what I'm doing and make it more accurate and more fun. And that is the name of the game. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next, probably slightly longer version of Dad's Shed.